Hey there, friend. Glad you're here again. Tonight, let's set aside all the noise of the day, the worries, the to-do lists, the endless rushing, and just breathe for a moment. You're safe now, tucked into your quiet space. Nothing matters but the sound of a story drifting in like a calm tide. Now, you've probably heard of Beowulf, the great hero who fought monsters in the dark. But what if we turned the tale on its head? What if, instead of the hero, we listened to the voice of the so-called monster, Grendel? For centuries he's been painted as a brute, a beast lurking in the shadows. But perhaps he only wanted peace. Perhaps it was not Grendel who disturbed men, but men who disturbed him. So, close your eyes, and let's wander into an ancient hall lit by fire and song, where the line between hero and villain begins to blur. Before the songs, before the stories, before my name was turned into a hiss of fear, I was simply a creature of the marsh. The mist was my blanket, the reeds my shelter, and the soft hum of night my only companion. I lived quietly, far from the fires of men, where the earth was damp and the air carried the scent of moss and rain. I was not born with rage in my heart. My steps were heavy, yes, my shape strange to human eyes, but I did not seek war. I wandered the marshlands, listening to the frogs at dusk, watching owls sweep low across the water. The moonlight painted silver across the still pools, and in that light I felt at peace. But men do not understand what they do not know. To them, anything beyond the glow of their hearth is a threat. And so they called me monster. They whispered that I was born of shadows, that my blood carried curses, yet I had never harmed them. Not then, not until they began to disturb the silence I held dear. It started with their hall. Herot, they called it. A great wooden hall built close enough that its light bled across the marsh. At first, I only watched from afar, curious. Inside, men gathered, drinking and feasting. Their laughter rose like sparks into the night, loud and endless. The sound cut across the quiet of the marsh, shattering the peace that once wrapped me like a second skin. Night after night, their songs grew louder. Harps strum, voices boomed, the floor shook with the stamp of their feet, and with every cheer, every roar of drunken joy, something inside me twisted. Was it jealousy? Perhaps, for I had no feast, no fire, no company. Or perhaps it was sorrow that their joy came at the cost of my silence. I pressed my claws into the earth, listening to them sing of their gods, their victories, their bright heroics. None of them knew the marsh. None of them knew me. Yet their voices declared I was cursed, a shadow meant to be destroyed. And so, little by little, I began to move closer, drawn not by hunger for flesh, but by a hunger for quiet. For just once, I wished to silence the hall, to let the marsh breathe again.
The night I chose to step closer to the hall, the mist clung to my skin like a warning. My marsh was silent, every frog stilled, every owl gone to perch. Only Hierot lived, burning with firelight, spilling laughter into the dark. I crouched at the edge of the trees. From there I could see them, warriors with golden cups in their hands, meat tearing between their teeth, voices booming in songs of triumph. Their harp strings quivered in the air, sharp as arrows to my ears. I did not hate them. I wanted only quiet, a return to the stillness that was mine before they came. But how do you ask men to lower their voices when they do not even see you as living? To them I was already a shadow, already a curse, already a beast meant for slaying. So I lingered, breathing the smoke that drifted from their fires. Each laugh stabbed like a spark in my chest. Each song struck against me like a hammer. I pressed my hands to my ears, but still their joy bled through the night. It was then I made my choice, not to kill, not to feast, but to silence, just for one night. If their voices stopped, perhaps the marsh would breathe again. Perhaps I could sleep. I moved closer. The ground trembled beneath me, though I tried to tread lightly. My claws dug into the soil as I reached the great wooden doors of Hierot. The sound inside roared like thunder, shaking my very bones. For a moment I hesitated, my reflection caught in the iron bindings of the hall doors. Eyes wide, shoulders bent, not a monster, but a creature tired of noise. Then, with one push, the doors burst open. The firelight struck my skin, the heat licked against me, and every head inside turned. Cups froze mid-air. Songs died on their lips. Silence. At last. But it was not the silence I had hoped for. It was a silence heavy with fear, with hatred, with the certainty that I had crossed a line I could never return from.
The silence inside Hierot did not last. It shattered the moment one man screamed. His cry was not of courage, but of terror, and it spread like fire among the others. Swords scraped against their scabbards, benches toppled, cups spilled onto the floor. I had not moved. I only stood there, filling the doorway, my shoulders brushing the frame, my breath steaming in the firelight. I thought perhaps they would see that I had no weapon, that I had not struck. But men do not look with their eyes, they look with their fear. The first warrior lunged. His blade flashed toward me, but it did not cut as he hoped. It skidded across my skin, leaving only a sting. Still, the attempt woke something inside me. My quiet plea had been answered with steel. I pushed him aside, harder than I meant to. His body crashed into the tables, scattering food, shattering plates. Gasps rose around the hall, louder than any song they had sung. I stepped further in. My shadow swallowed the firelight, and in that darkness I saw their faces clearly. Wide eyes, lips trembling, hands gripping swords that they themselves doubted could save them. Go, I wanted to say. Leave me in peace. Leave the marsh in peace.
But my voice was nothing like theirs. When I tried to speak, it came out as a growl, deep and rumbling, and to their ears it was the voice of a beast. The hall became chaos. Some fought, others fled. My claws struck wood and iron, breaking more than I ever intended. The harder they pushed me back, the stronger the storm within me grew, and so the night filled with sounds I had never wished to hear. The clamor of battle, the cries of fear, the breaking of bodies and bones. When at last I stumbled back into the night, Heorot lay broken behind me, not silent, never silent, but filled with wailing and mourning. And in that moment I understood. I had not restored peace. I had awakened war.
I fled back to the marsh, the cold mist wrapping around me like an old cloak. The reeds bent under my weight, the black waters rippled at my passing, and the night swallowed me again. Yet for the first time, the marsh did not feel like a refuge. It felt like a cage, a place I was driven into, hunted into. Behind me, the echoes of Heorot still rang in my head, the shouts, the clashing, the cries. I pressed my claws into the mud, wishing I could dig away the memory, bury it deep where it could not reach me. But the sounds clung to me, heavier than chains. In the nights that followed, the songs stopped. Heorot no longer rang with joy. Its fires still burned, but their voices were muted, guarded. At first I thought I had won. I thought silence had returned. But it was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of waiting, waiting for revenge. I saw them from afar, gathering weapons, sharpening spears, training under the moonlight. Word spread quickly through their kind. I heard whispers carried on the wind, the monster of the marsh, the curse in the night. They gave me a name I never chose, Grendel. With every whisper my solitude shrank. Hunters dared to step closer to my swamp. Arrows sometimes cut through the reeds. Fires burned at the edge of the waters. They wanted me gone, not because I was cruel, but because I had frightened them. And men cannot live long with fear. They must cage it or kill it. I tried to stay hidden, to let their hatred burn itself out, but their restlessness would not die. The hall they built was more than a home. It was a promise to themselves, a defiance to everything wild. As long as it stood, they would keep their fire, their laughter, their endless noise, and as long as I lived, they would not forget me. I began to understand a truth I did not want. There would be no peace for me any more, not in the marsh, not in the night, not anywhere their eyes could turn. And in the distance, I began to sense something else, rumors drifting on the wind, carried by travelers and seafarers. A new name spoken with pride and hope, Beowulf.
The whispers of his name reached me long before he did. Beowulf. It came first from fishermen who passed near the marsh, their voices carrying over the still waters.
Then from traders who crossed the king's road, boasting of a warrior whose strength rivaled storms, whose grip could crush bone, whose courage never faltered. A man who had fought monsters of the sea and lived to tell of it. At first I laughed, though the sound was bitter even to my own ears. Men are always inventing heroes, weaving tales larger than truth to keep their fears at bay. Perhaps Beowulf was just another story, another song to steady trembling hands. But the more I listened, the heavier the stories grew. This man was not just a tale, he was coming. He had heard of the creature that haunted Heorot. He had set sail with men at his back and iron in his hands. He was not coming to speak, not coming to bargain. He was coming to end me. That night, I stood at the edge of the marsh and looked toward the hall. Its fires were bright again, brighter than ever, as if the very walls themselves dared to shine in defiance of me. Laughter had returned, not of joy, but of triumph. They were celebrating before the battle had even begun. Inside, I imagined Beowulf sitting among them, broad shoulders, calm eyes, the kind of man who does not flinch at shadows. They would feast him, praise him, fill his ears with songs of the beast he must slay. And in their stories, I would grow larger, darker, crueler, until even the truth of me was lost. I dug my claws into the earth. I was not the beast they made me. I wanted silence, nothing more. But heroes do not sail across seas for silence. They come from monsters, and if they cannot find one, they will make one. The marsh shivered around me. Even the wind seemed to pause as though the world itself held its breath for what was to come. And deep inside, where even the reeds could not hear, I felt it too. The end of my solitude was near. Beowulf was coming.
The night before he came, the marsh was restless. The reeds hissed against one another, the black water stirred without wind, and even the frogs held their throats closed. It was as if the land itself knew what was coming. I paced the edge of the swamp, claws dragging furrows in the wet earth. Every sound from Heorot carried sharper through the night, the clang of copse, the rise of voices, the laughter of warriors who drank too deeply. Their joy was not born of peace, it was sharpened by anticipation. They were not waiting for morning, they were waiting for me. For years I had lived in shadow, slipping between silence and hunger, never fully belonging to their world nor to the wild. But now there was no hiding. Beowulf's presence was a weight, pressing against me even before I laid eyes on him. I could feel him, steady and unyielding like the tide. Fear twisted in me, though I hated to name it. Not fear of death. I had wandered the edges of darkness long enough to know it well. But fear of being seen, truly seen, to have someone stand before me and declare, not from rumor, but from sight, what I was.
monster or something less. I lowered myself into the water, letting it close over my back. The cold wrapped around me, numbing, anchoring me in the present. My reflection wavered on the surface, distorted by ripples, wide eyes, twisted brow, scars from blades that had failed to kill me. I searched for the beast they spoke of, the terror sung in halls across the land, but all I saw was a face carved by loneliness. The night deepened. Heorot's firelight spilled gold into the sky, a beacon calling me closer. My body trembled with the pull, half dread, half inevitability. For the first time I wondered if this would be my last night beneath the marsh reeds, my last night hearing the quiet song of water and earth. I rose, dripping, mud clinging to my skin. The time for silence was ending. Beowulf awaited, and with him the truth of who or what I truly was.
The path to Heorot felt longer than ever that night. Each step sank deep into the wet earth, pulling at me as though the marsh itself begged me not to go. But I could not stop. The firelight ahead drew me, steady as a star, and with every breath I tasted the smoke of their feasting. The hall stood tall against the night, its wooden walls glowing as if they held the sun within. Laughter rose from inside, bold and careless. I pressed my palm to the door, its frame warm against my skin. For one heartbeat I hesitated. Beyond this wall waited the man whose name had filled my nights. Beyond this wall there was no turning back. I pushed. The door groaned open, and Heorot fell silent. Warriors turned their heads, eyes wide, cups frozen in their hands. The firelight crackled, the only sound between us. I stepped inside, my shadow spilling across the floor. Their courage was thin, fragile under my gaze. And then I saw him. Beowulf did not flinch. He did not rise in panic or shout in fear. He sat where he was, calm, his eyes locked on mine as though he had been waiting all along. His presence was heavy, not loud but certain, like a stone at the bottom of a river. I moved toward him, my breath rattling in the stillness. Around us, men gripped their weapons, but they did not move. They waited for him, for Beowulf. I reached for the nearest warrior, intending only to push him aside, to test the edges of this new silence. But the moment my claws closed, Beowulf rose. His grip was unlike any I had felt before. No blade had pierced me, no spear had truly harmed me. But this was different. His strength locked around me like iron forged by the gods themselves. I pulled, twisted, roared, but his grasp held. For the first time I felt it, not the fear of others, but my own. And in the firelight of Heorot, with every eye upon us, the battle I had never sought had truly begun.
The hall erupted around us, but I heard none of it. The clash of shields, the cries of men, it all blurred into silence beside the grip that held me. Beowulf's hands locked into my flesh, as though forged of stone, unyielding, relentless. I thrashed, my claws tearing through wood and air. Benches splintered, tables flew, warriors stumbled to the sides, their weapons raised yet useless. They knew this was not their battle. It was his, mine and his alone. I roared, the sound shaking the beams overhead, but Beowulf did not waver. His eyes burned with a calm fire, a flame that neither fear nor doubt could touch. Every move I made, he met. Every twist of my body, every desperate wrench to break free, he answered with strength that felt endless. Panic surged in me, raw, unfamiliar. I had always been the storm in the night, the terror others whispered of. No hand had ever held me, yet here I was, caught like a beast in a snare. I tried to speak, to growl words he might understand. I did not seek this, I only wanted silence. But the sounds that left my throat were monstrous, twisted by fear and fury. To him it was only the voice of the creature he had come to slay. Pain ripped through me as his grip tightened. My arm, my strongest limb, strained against him, the muscles tearing, the bones shuddering. Never had I felt such weakness. It was not the strike of a blade that undid me, but the sheer force of his will, the refusal to let go. The hall shook with the struggle. Firelight leapt across the walls, shadows dancing like ghosts. Men cried out in awe, their voices rising with every heartbeat. The monster was faltering, the hero was winning. And in that moment, as my strength began to slip, I saw it clear. Beowulf was not merely a man. He was everything they longed for, the shape of their courage, the proof that fear could be broken. And I was everything they needed me to be. The beast, the enemy, the darkness made flesh. My body strained, breaking under his hold, and I knew this night would not end as it had before. This time, silence would not be mine to keep.
The night seemed endless, darker and heavier than all the nights that came before. Grendel lay deep within the shadows of his cave, listening to the marsh water lapping gently against the stone. Every sigh of wind carried faint echoes from Heorot, once sharp enough to cut him inside, now softened into ghostly whispers. His body felt weak, trembling like an old tree whose roots no longer held firm in the earth. Is this how it ends? He thought, though no voice returned an answer. Memories came, unbidden but clear. He remembered a time when his mother still lived, when the marsh was filled with warmth instead of silence. Back then, he still believed there could be a place for him in the world of the living. But the songs and laughter of men, their fires and feasts, had built a wall around him, one he could never climb. Every glance from them, filled with fear and hatred, pushed him further into the shadows. How strange, he thought, that all he had ever wished for was peace, and yet he was forever named Destroyer. And then
He remembered Beowulf's eyes, not like the others, not only filled with terror. There had been something else there, a spark of recognition, perhaps, or maybe just courage. But still, those eyes belonged to an enemy, not to a friend. His limbs ached, his breath grew heavier. The world felt farther and farther away. Yet, amid the pain, a quiet calm began to take its place. At last, there would be no more struggle, no more hunger, no more proving to the world that he had a right to exist. As his eyes grew heavy, the marsh seemed to whisper around him, its reeds, its waters, its stones, promising that his story would not vanish. Even if men called him monster, the land would remember. And just before the darkness claimed him, Grendel understood. He was part of the tale, not merely the shadow of it.
Morning came slowly, painting the marshlands in pale gold. Mist drifted low across the water, and silence stretched where once there had been heavy footsteps and the growl of a lonely creature. The world of men and the world of the marsh had parted forever that dawn. In Heorot they sang of Beowulf the hero. They raised cups of mead, their voices bright with victory. Grendel's name was spoken only as a warning, a shadow destroyed by the strength of a champion. No one asked if the creature had ever felt sorrow, or if he had only longed for peace. But the marsh remembered. The reeds swaying with the wind, the stones damp with moss, the cave that stood empty, all of it whispered a softer truth, that once a forsaken soul had lived there, seeking nothing but belonging. Grendel's tale did not end in the songs of men. It lived on in the breath of the earth itself. To humans, he would always be a monster. To the marsh, he was part of its heart, a lonely being who had tried to survive in a world that feared him. And so, dear listener, we have reached the end of tonight's tale. We walked through the marsh with Grendel, not as a monster, but as a soul longing to be heard. His story reminds us that even in the darkest legends, there are hidden truths waiting quietly to be found. Now, let your thoughts grow lighter, like mist drifting across still waters. Leave behind the noise of the day and carry only calm into your dreams. May sleep embrace you gently, and may you awaken refreshed, as if touched by quiet dawn. Good night, and may your rest be peaceful.